Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mogul Performance Podcast. My name is Evan, and today we're going to be digging deeper into one of the most common frustrations that I hear from leaders. And it's one of the most dangerous ones that you can't ignore. And what is that leaders face? What do they say to me? My team isn't listening to me. What do I do? Now, when I say that, and when leaders say those things to me, they're not saying that they're being outright the team member is being outright defiant in the meeting, right? You'll notice that, let's say, instructions aren't being followed, for example, or priorities are being missed, or you have to repeat yourself over and over and over again more than what you would like. And over time, that chips away trust, productivity, honesty, and then, quite frankly, your patience. So before we dive into this, I want to just do a quick promo. Don't forget to check out the Mogul Performance website. At Mogul Performance, we offer coaching and consulting packages for all leaders, whether you are a new leader, whether you are a mid-level manager, whether you are an executive. We offer packages specifically tailored to your level of leadership. And you can check those out. We also have free resources. Some of them we're actually going to be going over today on today's podcast. You can download those on the Mogul Performance website. Go to the resources page, scroll to the bottom, type in your information, and then there's plenty of free resources on there that you can use. Now, today, what we're going to be breaking down in this podcast is why does your team not listen to you in the first place? What is going on? Also, how you can tell if there is a performance problem or if it is a motivation problem. There also the mindset shift that leaders must make if they want to break the cycle of their teams not listening to them, and also how to move from that authoritarian, autocratic style into something that is far more effective, such as the servant leader or transformational leadership style. We're even going to bring in some psychology on this, and we're going to talk about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so you can see exactly where the disconnect might be, and then what you need to do in order to address it. So, there are some common leader reactions that we see. So let's start with the typical leader reaction when people aren't listening. It's almost always frustration, followed by there's tightening of control that happens right after that. And their inner voice says, well, if they're not listening, I need to be more direct. I need to be more clear and maybe even more forceful. That's only going to get you so far. That can work for the short term. And you know what? I want to point out too that being autocratic, and having in transactional, there's a time and a place for that too. Leadership happens in all different kinds of places, right? It happens in the work environment. It happens at home. It happens outside of home. What happens if let's say you witness a car accident, right? And you're on the freeway. You get out, 10 other people get out of their car, and everyone's just staring at each other. So then you take the leadership vacuum, and then what do? You tell people what to do. You say, hey, you go get the AED. You call 911. You go grab a tourniquet. You elevate their feet. You get the door open. That's an autocratic style of leadership because there's an emergency situation that is happening right there in that moment. But how often does that really happen? Right? There's that is a stress. That is a moment of high stress. And so if we're leading with that style, we're creating that sense of stress consistently, right? We're putting people in that fight or flight mode all the time. So again, there's a time and a place for these things to happen. Like if a major software goes down and it's affecting the entire organization, it's affecting all the customers, hundreds of thousands of customers, then yeah, an autocratic style might be appropriate there. But again, some people say you should use autocratic style less than 5%. I say you should use it less than 1% of the time, because it backfires when you're using all the time. People, they'll comply. They'll listen to you, right? You're the leader. You're in a position, right? That positional authority. It'll churn some gears. It'll make some things happen. But what's the long-term effects that are going to happen? You will see that that team members won't commit, and you'll get the bare minimum, and they're not going to be engaged. When we lead with this style too much, I want to provide a real example too. Actually, I watched a Netflix documentary with the Travis Scott concert that happened in 2021 in Texas. 8 people died at that concert. Now, at the end of the day, what was the issue? It comes down to leadership. No one was willing to step up and speak and share their opinion, share their voice. And this happens more often than not. The Challenger explosion, that's another good example where people were too afraid to speak up, right? And when we're leading with that style, when we're leading with being, autocratic and maybe even a micromanager, people just like, they think, well, my opinion doesn't matter. Why should I say anything in the first place? Now, I know those are catastrophic, horrible events that happened. But the thing is that we won't see people stepping up. And these things can cost. There's opportunity cost out there. Like this could cost opportunities for an entire organization because people we're not tapping into their innovation because they feel like their ideas are going to be stupid. So here's the truth. When your team isn't listening, it's really just the words you said. It's the context, the trust, clarity, and their level of buy-in that is completely missing. So going into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to figure out what is going wrong, you can use this as a diagnostic tool. So at the bottom of the pyramid, right, of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've got the physiological needs. Can they breathe? Do they have water? Is there shelter? You could say electricity, internet, I guess, now at this point. Are they healthy? Do they feel safe? Are they rested? Do they have food? Can they afford food? More than likely, where we are in our positions, this isn't something that we necessarily, they're on payroll, they're getting a salary. This isn't something that we necessarily need to worry about. The next level up is where we can start paying attention. Safety needs. These could be job security, predictable expectations. Are they worried about layoffs that could be coming up down the road, or toxic politics, or unclear expectations? If their focus is on survival, then they're not focused on growth, right? They're just thinking, I just need to make it to the next day. I just need to do the next thing. I need to get to the next meeting. And there's just a constant state of stress. And they don't care about growing or developing at that point, which ultimately hurts you, your team, and then the organization as a whole. Then the next level is belonging. If they feel disconnected from you or the team, then they're not leaning into what you're saying. So there needs to be a culture of trust. There needs to be that sense of tribe, that tribe feeling where everyone is valued and they can connect with someone else. Because that's ultimately what's going to bring out that innovation and those new ideas and that, quite frankly, the trust in the entire team. The next level after that is esteem, which is when people wanting that need or feel respected and valued. If they believe that their input doesn't matter, they're just going to clock in and clock out. They are mentally, they're not there. They are completely checked out. And then lastly, at the top, this is where we want everyone to be, but not everyone's going to be there, is self-actualization. This is the zone where people are intrinsically motivated and are growing. This is where listening naturally happens because they want to understand and they want to improve. They look at everything that you are saying and they are just running with it, right? And because they see you as an expert and they want to learn and they want to grow. And it's not even
about themselves. It's about everyone else that surrounds them and bringing everyone else up, because it's more important than just themselves. And the biggest thing is that they're intrinsically motivated. We can use extrinsic motivation, right? These could be fear of punishment, a lack of a bonus. We could use praise or awards. Anything that is outside of the individual that we're using to motivate them, that works. And that can help you, if you do it right, that can help you get into that level of intrinsic motivation. And we can move team members up that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, into that self-actualization where they're like, they realize that all those extrinsic things, the money, the award, the worry, that doesn't matter anymore. It's about being the best versions of themselves, and that's where we want people to be, and that's where we're trying to get them. But the extrinsic motivation, which most leaders are relying on, it's not going to get you very far, and it's going to feel very, very exhausting trying to get someone strictly through to get them where they need to be strictly through extrinsic motivation. So I want to talk about if it's the team member's not listening, if it's a performance or if it's a motivation issue. So here's a question. If it's performance, do they know how to do what you're asking them to do? Can they do the task? Can they, are they, they may be lacking training. They might need training, resources, or clarity. And it's an easy fix, right? If someone cannot perform to do their job because it's a skill issue, we can coach them, we can consult them, we can create a development plan, we can upskill them, we can remove barriers, we can do all these different kinds of things, right? It's also why you hire for character over skill. You can teach skill all day, but character is something that's different. Next is if it's motivation. Can they do it? Can they do the job? Have you seen them do the job before? But they're not doing it. This is about the connection to purpose, a personal drive in alignment with the values of maybe the team and then also the entire organization. They're not seeing that connection. They're not seeing how this is what's the point of what they're doing? Is it making an impact? So a quick way to tell if it's a performance issue or if it's a motivation issue, ask yourself this question. If their lives were on the line and they can do the task that you're asking them to do, then it's a motivation issue. If they can't do it, then that's a performance issue. Now, that brings us into the leadership mindset shift. When your team isn't listening, your instinct might be to lean into that autocratic style, be bold, be transactional. But the long game to make this work is through servant and transformational leadership. If we're consistently leading through command and telling and authority, that doesn't motivate today's work. Look, that may have worked back in the World War II time, right? That doesn't work anymore. That's an old way to lead. And again, there's a time and place to lead that way. But if we lead that way now, what happens? Well, we'll get some things done, short term. And some of you might be thinking to yourself, well, I've always led that way. I've always led with an autocratic and transactional style. And I've always told people what to do and put them in their place. Okay? At what cost? No, literally, at what cost? How much is turnover? You know how much it costs for turnover? To bring someone up to speed on their skills and then to lose them because of a leadership style. The cost of turnover, according to the Society of Human Resources Management, back in 2023 or 2024, one of those years, 214% of their salary. So You lose a $100,000 employee. Is that worth it to you? More than $200,000? Is that worth it to you? Not only that, is it worth the time? Now you have to train someone else in the next 3 to 6 months. Can they do it? You might be able to pick up people on their skills, based off of what they've done before, but they still need to learn your organization and how you're doing things. And the bigger your organization is, the more complex it's going to be, the longer it's going to take for them to get used to it. So at what cost? The long game is in servant and transformational leadership. That is how we win. And that is how we provide for our team. Servant leadership flips the script. So instead of asking, why aren't they doing what I told them to do? It's, what is getting in their way? And what do I need to do as a leader to remove it? And then transformational leadership inspires change by connecting work. What is it that they're doing? The craft that they're doing. They come in every single day to do, that ties to the bigger vision and develops their strengths and makes them feel ownership of the outcomes that they're producing. Transformational leadership shows that and highlights that. So what does that look like in practice? Well, that's spending more time listening than talking. Ask open-ended questions. Get clarification instead of giving directives to your team. And then invite feedback on how you deliver your information. Everyone is going to be a little bit different. At Local Performance, what we do is we have different types of personality type indicators that we use. And that provides insight on how someone would like, some of this insight is how someone likes to receive information or even praise. Some people want information boxed up, sent in an email, all attachments. They can look at it, they can digest the information. Some people prefer to hear it over just a conversation. They can digest what they're saying. They got it, and they move on. But how you deliver that information is going to be different for everybody. And then also how you deliver it to your team might be different, or across other teams might be different. It just depends. And it's about asking for feedback. How do you prefer to receive information? When's the last time you asked that question? How do you prefer to receive praise? When's the last time you asked that question? Someone prefers to receive praise just over a quick high five, virtual high five, in an email, versus publicly in front of everybody. That can be different between all other people. How you receive praise is gonna be different than everyone else. So just because you like to receive praise in one way or information in one way doesn't mean everyone else does. And then there's being transparent about the why behind decisions. They have to know what the why is. Now look, change happens all the time. There's always change in organizations since the beginning of time, right? There's always been change, and we've always had to work through change. And the organizations that drive change the best are the ones that communicate very, very clearly the why behind the decision. And the leader takes that responsibility and they provide the why. Now look, I understand that we are human. We may not agree with what that change is. And you know what? That's okay. We can not agree, but you are a leader in an organization. You are on their bus. And you are all going to one direction together. That means you got to get everyone else on that bus too, to work towards getting to that destination. So you got to provide that why. But again, we're human, right? Maybe you don't agree with a specific component, and someone asks you, what are your thoughts on this new software update? And you say, well, I don't like this feature or that feature, but if we bring this software update and we get it up and it's running, smoothly, and we have it running, a week before the deadline is due, and that's going to give us more credibility to make other updates to the software so we can make it the way we want to make it, right? So it's creating that connection, but also moving the team forward
in a positive direction. Now let's move over into some practical tools and strategies that you can use this week to help your team members drive performance. So one of the things that I share with leaders and I use with them is the Mogul Performance one-page leader guide. So if you have not downloaded that, pause this podcast right now. There is a tool that I created to help leaders. It's very easy. Right? I don't like complex things. It's very easy to address people type issues very quickly. Think of tic-tac-toe. It literally looks like that, and you can pinpoint the spot of what you're facing, and you can see what you need to do in order to fix it. You can grab that resource on the resources page on the Mogul Performance website. Just scroll down to the bottom, put in your information, and then bonus, there's also plenty of other resources on there too. Simple, easy to digest. Go ahead and check those out. Those will set you up for success. Then there is to clarify the non-negotiables. Not everything that we do, we need to die on a hill on. You know, I understand we got to hold the line on everything. Well, yes and no, right? Mostly no. Pick 2 to 3 things that are non-negotiables. There's zero room for interpretation. And hone in on those things and communicate those clearly. And then allow a little bit of flexibility in the other areas. You know, allow innovation, thoughts, get some input. You know, what could be done better? And then the third is to build in checkpoints. So don't just be laissez-faire and delegate and then disappear. Set touch points to confirm alignment. If there is one thing that I want you to take away from this episode today, is to have your check-ins. What is a check-in? A check-in is just a 30-minute to 1 hour conversation, usually 1 hour blocked off on the calendar, you have with your team member. See how things are going. And you do this, I would suggest at least one time a month, at least once. But if anything, once every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the level of development where the team member is at. And a check-in doesn't need to be complicated. You can have questions ready to go that you just go through every single time you have a check-in. It could be what's going well, what's not going well, what are your wins, and then what do you need from me? 4 questions. And then let those questions or the conversation flow in any direction it needs to go, and you can address those as needed. And you can add any other questions you want to add in there too that you feel fit. But the key thing is to have these touch points, have these conversations. Because if you're not having these conversations, especially if you're in a remote role, how do you know? How does your team member know if they're doing something well to what is expected of them? They don't, because no one's giving them feedback. So we need to have these check-ins. And on top of that, these check-in points are almost their performance feedback conversations too. You know, it lets the team member know, like, yes, you're doing well in this area. No, you're not doing well in that area. These are things that we need to work on. These are things that you're doing really well. These are things that we can set you a development plan up for. Here's some growth areas. Here's some opportunities. All kinds of conversations can happen there. And the good thing about having those check-ins conversations are that you get to have a little bit of a performance conversation. And then if your organization has a annual review or performance review, then when that comes around, whatever the rating is, it shouldn't be a surprise. It should not be a surprise. If someone has been lacking and not performing well, these conversations should have been happening in a checkpoint, in a check-in conversation. So they should expect that kind of review. Now, if you're praising and saying you're doing really well, you are one of the best in the teams, you know, all these great things, and then they get an average review, you got to be careful of that too, because then that's gonna create distrust, because you were teeing them up to be this type of the high performer, the best person, the top 5% in the organization, when you actually, in fact, said you're actually the 50% to 60%. That's not fair, right? So we got to be careful about how we're having these conversations. But in general, don't stress out on that too much. If you're not having these check-ins, do your check-ins. Make sure you're having those check-ins. And if you are a team member and you're listening to this podcast,
and you're not having check-ins, you go up to your leader and you tell them, I would like to have a check-in. I want to know how I'm doing. I would like to have this conversation. And then the fourth one is to model the leadership behavior, such as listening, that you expect. So if you are distracted when people talk to you, when you're on a meeting and you're on your phone, checking your emails, seeing what text is going on, thinking about lunch, you know, everyone else is going to mirror that. You're the leader. You're the one who's driving the bus. They're gonna follow suit, right? They're gonna be right there with you. They're gonna be doing the same thing. So if you want your team members to be someone who listens and opens up and provides their feedback or their points of view, then you should too. Because we want our team members to model our behaviors as a good leader, not an autocratic one. If we're continuing to do that autocratic style, our employees are they're going to shut down, and they're not going to display the behaviors that we want to see. Then lastly, close the loop. Give people input. Let them know what happened with their ideas, right? So they bring something up, even if you don't like their suggestion, you explain it, and you explain why, right? Don't let that linger, right? Between your check-ins, if you don't address this question that someone might have, and you don't address it, and it just lingers, that sends a message to the team member that my leader doesn't care, or they didn't think it was a big deal. So make sure you're closing the loop on these conversations. So I have this quick visual aid that I will put on YouTube and then on Spotify. It'll be in the show note captions. It is a 2x2 matrix to help leaders figure out where to start. If this is something that you feel like that you're not really sure if it's a skill or will issue, well, I got a framework for you. Again, I keep things simple. So there's two axes. The horizontal one is skill, going from low to high. And then the y-axis is the will, from low to high. So we have on the top left quadrant, there is a high skill, high will. This is where we want everybody. We want everyone to be here, right? But we don't have everyone here all the time. So we want to empower these team members, give them responsibilities, delegate tasks, secondment, like more responsibilities that you are doing and you can provide to them. And that also helps with succession planning too. Get them skilled into what your role is. Then on the top right, we have low skill, high will. Think of an intern, maybe just getting ready to wrap up college, just finished college, and they're highly motivated. They probably think they know a lot of skills, but they don't have all the skills, but they're very highly motivated. Well, this is your opportunity to coach them. Ask questions. And most definitely create a development plan to bring up that skill. Give them something clear to follow, because when a team member they have a goal that you have built with them, and something that they can strive towards, something they can achieve, that motivates them to work towards that goal. Then on the bottom, below the x-axis, is high skill, low will. So they can do the job. They have low motivation. So what do? We use that transformational leadership style. We motivate by connecting what they're doing in their job to the mission and vision. When was the last time that you saw one of your team members do something that was directly connected to the vision, or you challenged them to think about how does that connect with the vision? If you do not know your own organization's vision, you are failing as a leader, because you should be able to explain and articulate exactly when a team member does something, and you can connect that straight to the mission or vision. And then also we want to inspire through our own actions. If we want a team member to behave a certain way, we need to show up, even if we don't have that high motivation, we still need to show up with some of that energy, right? I understand we're human, but we are leaders now. The things that we do are magnified, and that's That's the price that we pay to be leaders. And then on the bottom right, low skill, low will. This is where someone you've had conversations with them, you've sent them to training, and you set crystal clear expectations. But they're not able to perform the job, or they're not willing to learn how to be able to do the job. So what do you do here? At this point, it's reassign to a better fit role and continue to set really clear expectations if that is not an option. And then other than that, obviously there is termination. So to wrap up, teams not listening isn't just a behavior problem. It's a signal to us as leaders. It's a signal that we need to dig deep into the needs, the motivation, and the environment that we have created as leaders. Making that mindset shift from control to service, from authority to inspiration. And then we can diagnose whether we're dealing with a skill issue, a skill gap, or a will gap. And remember, you need to listen, because listening is a two-way street. Stop being so directive and interrupting what your team member is saying. You need to step back. You need to listen more than when you're speaking. And then if you want some of the resources that we talked about, again, they are on the Mogul Performance website. You can go download those on the resources tab on the bottom of the page. Other than that, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. If you got some value from today's conversation, share it with another leader. Share it on social media. And until next time, lead intentionally, lead boldly, keep growing, and don't forget, be a mogul.